Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Tech Exchange Seminar Series. I'm Ranga Settler. I'm the one of the associate directors of the Institute for Artificial Intelligence and Data Science. The objective of the series, as you are aware, is to familiarize the university community with research that's going on in AI and AI adjacent areas across the university. A lot of times people are not aware of what is happening on campus, and it's our desire here to bring more exposure to the amazing research work that's going on across the campus, and to also try to see if that can foster new collaborations, new conversations, and so with that intent in mind, again, if you have fellow faculty that, or anyone that wishes to utilize this opportunity to talk about your research, please please participate and encourage your colleagues to participate as well. So we do this every semester, and it's at the same time every Tuesday. It's recorded. It's available for people to revisit later as well. And we have an extensive mailing list, and the information goes out to most of the departments on campus that are interested in this sort of research. With that introduction, today we have two exciting talks. Both to do with how you can use current large language model technology to help in various things. Our first speaker is Professor Barry Smith. He's the SUNY Distinguished Professor in Philosophy and the Ontology Guru, and is always a fascinating speaker to listen to. So, Barry, you can take it away.
Good. So just a little bit of background. I published a book with a co-author called Why Machines Will Never Rule the World, which is a very much a study of the limits of large language models and other varieties of AI. And I will be talking about some of those limits today. So this was my original title, but then I noticed that the AID organized this talk on a much more interesting topic. So I changed my title. Could AI and data science reshape how we understand history and geography? Can we do geography or history better using ChatGPT? That is more or less the question. And so they released ChatGPT 5 very recently, and Sam Altman, who is the guru of the ChatGPT algorithms, said that this had now reached the PhD level in more or less all disciplines. And so the one question is, well, is this true for disciplines like history and geography? And then a related question, can we use AI to improve the teaching of history and geography? And my answer to all of these questions is no. So I'm going to focus on the French and Indian War, and specifically on the beginning in 1756. This is important for an Englishman because this is when anyway. So these are maps of the French and Indian War. I collected about 10 of them, but I could have collected many more maps. I could have collected many more military plans, many more documents pertaining to the number of deaths at given battles, and so forth. So there's a huge amount of data on the French and Indian War. I have no idea whether a significant fraction of this data was used to train ChatGPT. My suspicion is that it wouldn't make any difference, even if they had used a lot of these maps in some sense to train. Do you happen to know if they used maps, old maps?
I believe there were, at least documents that are like that.
Yeah. But if you try and test the ability of ChatGPT to produce maps, you will be shocked at how badly they perform. So, and this applies to all maps, not just maps about historical events, but maps, for instance, of the rate of investment in AI in different countries. You get a map, it will tell you that Iran is one of the highest investment countries in AI. But if you look more closely, you will see that Iran is actually in Saudi Arabia. And South Africa is at the bottom of both the Latin American continent and also the Indian subcontinent. South Africa is not anywhere in Africa on this map. You can make maps like this without any effort, any question with a geographical connotation. ChatGPT will likely produce a map which is full of mistakes. So this is the map I chose as my hobby horse. So it's a map about they say it's a map of that. Well, I can give this to you in a readable form. It's a map of that part of America which was the principal seat of war in 1756. And human beings can read this. So we can see that some of the typography is a little bit hard to follow. So the St. Lawrence River is spread across 3 squares, but we can read that. It doesn't cause us human beings any problems. And so I tried this with Perplexity Claude GPT-5. Please use this map to create a simplified map suitable for teaching. And the one idea is that we apply this to many maps and we thereby can extract patterns about how the war developed, how cartography developed, how politics developed. And because ChatGPT is so clever and brilliant and so well trained, we should get all kinds of interesting information. This is Perplexity. So this is not very good. This is porridge. Atlantic Ogier. I mean, you can't read most of it. First Tivania is Pennsylvania. So Claude, this is much better, but it's complete nonsense. So the Great Lakes are on the western side of Quebec. Philadelphia is south of New Orleans. The Mississippi has nothing to do with New Orleans. So it's beautiful in some sense. But it shows that they don't understand very much. They don't understand what a map is, how to arrange text on a map, how to use color on a map, what a boundary is, what a coastline is. Can you work out where the coastline is here? What teaching is. I mean, this is not going to help anybody teach geography or history or anything. Maybe how not to draw maps. This is another one. Bits of mountains scattered around. Quebec at the end of a long line, and then another Quebec. No boundaries anywhere. So let's try. So actually, there is one good thing about Claude. It doesn't make any spelling mistakes. So you can read all the words. That's really a great achievement in this. So GPT-5, the same prompt. This is response number 1. I have hundreds of maps like this. So Massachusetts is not probably a correct spelling. And there are 2 New Hampshires. You can't tell where the water is. So this is Lake Nortov or Nortu and Pennsylvania both occupy the same area, which, given the clue regarding the Atlantic Ocean over there, should be water. But Pennsylvania is not. All right. And then there are incoherent longitude coordinates. So that is not the way to do longitude coordinates. All right, so my game in producing these hundreds of maps, and I have links which I can send to you if you're interested in the evidence, my game is to try and coax them in the direction of accuracy or usefulness. And so, given this map as the starting point, I asked them to make the title visible. So there it's visible. Let me go back to the one we were dealing with. Somehow I was jumped to the end. Now I'm going all the way to the end, so I'm making a mistake here, but So now I'm at the beginning again, am I? Oh, you're helping. All right, so that's the beginning. So now I'm trying to help this one. And so I say, please make the title and year visible and draw the border between Canada and New France and the British colonies. So they sort of drew the border. New York suddenly appeared from nowhere. Pennsylvania is spelled correctly here, but they still have problems with Massachusetts. And and they haven't got the title so that you can read it yet. So I keep working. Please make the title visible in its entirety and check the date, because we want this to be 1756. So they didn't. I mean, they made the title visible, all of it, but they still keep the wrong date. And Massachusetts is now spelled in yet another way. And Ontario Lake, Ontario L, seems to be on land. There's a lot of water above it, it seems. That's what we're aiming for, a map of that part of America, which was the principal seat of war. They have changed the focus. All right, so when I ask these questions, typically they just produce another map, which is typically not better than the previous map, but it will be different. But sometimes they give me long pages explaining all their errors and saying, on the next map, I will correct these errors. So this is an example of one of these pages. And it noticed the Massachusetts spellings. Atlantic was truncated as Atlante or Atlantke. And the correct thing it says is Atlantic Ocean. Thank you very much. And it gives me this, which is sort of correct over there. The title has moved to a different place now. The color scheme has disappeared. And now we get funny letters, like the first map that I showed. So Fort Overvijde seems to be a problem. There are two Massachusetts, which actually is correct, but they're not in the right positions. There was Massachusetts Bay and Massachusetts, I can't remember, Commonwealth or something, and they were separated. Here they are not separated, and they're also not properly named. And they're British colonies at this stage, of course. New Hampshire, if that's what NEH means, is to the east of New York, which is not right. Sorry, to the west of New York. There is a lake called Lake. So one finds very often the lake named Lake. And so on. So what is Fort Overvijde, I say? And it says it should be Fort Oswego. For some reason, they have a fascination with Fort Oswego, but it's always at the fringe of the map so that you can't quite read it in full. And so, where is it now? It's here, it's disappeared again. There's something called Antne here. There's Lake, and there's another lake called Lake Champi, which is sort of flying in space. And then Lake Gurge, which is a misprint for Lake George, which is in quite the wrong place. York, that's important because York, we now call Toronto, played an important role in the history of Canada. And so it's important that one distinguish between York, the city, and New York, the state. And then we have Kukukut. And so these are all the problems. The British colonies, which is not spelled correctly. Please mark more clearly the border of Canada on this map. Also fix names of lakes. So now we get yet another color scheme. They get a full title with only one spelling mistake. It's a map O-part. Lake Ontario and Lake Ontario. We have two lakes, one of them on land. And Lake Erie that's Pennsylvania. New York is now called New Hampshire, but it's given this Lake Ontario appendage. And the eastern part of Nova Scotia seems to be to the west of any other part of Nova Scotia. The Atlantic is spelt correctly. Pennsylvania is spelt correctly, but it's in the wrong place. Fort Oswego is spelt correctly, but it's very much in the wrong place. But they really liked Fort Oswego. They like to keep it there somehow. So New York has become New Hampshire. And the title is incorrect. It's spelled more or less correctly, but now it's stating principal seats rather than the principal seat of war, which is quite different from principal seats. And the date is wrong, still wrong. Oswego it's become, but we can't quite see it, but at least it's in Lake New York or something. There are several New Hampshires here. British have become Pritish, or they become Prittiple. About now, I start to lose my enthusiasm. It's getting boring. So this is now I'm guessing, but this is what they mean by the title. The British Hamris is British. I don't know what Hamris, but I'm assuming it's Hampshire. All right, please add colors and a legend to distinguish different areas on the map according to their category, for example, land or water. Now we have St. Pratt of something not named. We have no idea what those colors mean because they're using colors, the same color for Canada and for the British colonies, sorry, British. And the Atlantic is now misspelled. Fort Oswego is correctly spelled. I don't think it's there though. And we can't read the legend because it's the important part is missing. It wouldn't help though, because the color scheme is so crazy. All right, please separate the title from the map proper and complete the legend. So they did. It gets worse. It doesn't get better, however much you help it. And I can go on like this with 100 different maps. At the very end, it makes me really long lists of all the errors and says in the next map, we will have corrected all these errors. And then the next map has new errors. All right, so all of the yellow stuff is Canada. Massachusetts is a British colony, and the British colonies are British colonies. Lake Ontario is just about, something. It's not clear what's going on with the color scheme on the left. And Fort Buffalo seems now to be Fort in Henry. Now, there is a Fort Henry. It's on the other end of Lake Ontario. But I don't know what Fort might be. And then Crown Point is certainly not the name of Lake Ontario. Pennsylvania is not a British colony. And you get the idea. They're just all messed up. So then ChatGPT 5 says, would you like me to prepare a short teaching note to accompany the map, explaining its historical context for students? And I say, no, I'm always very polite, but I don't feel polite at this point. Please extend the map to include the mentioned lakes and rivers using blue color as per your legend. So now the Lake Erie is called Lake Champlain, which presumably means Lake Champlain, which is up the other end of New York. British colonies are, well, Pennsylvania is now called British colonies, and it's in the wrong place. Fort Oswego is in yet another place, and so on. At least the Atlantic Ocean seems to be in good shape. So that's as far as I got. Oh, I'm going around in a circle again. Let me make sure. I know what I'm doing wrong. Let me just make sure I do this properly. So this is a link where you can see the entire dialogue between me and it. And I have several of these links if anybody wants to study the Holy Roman Empire in 1032. I have 100 maps, all of them wrong. Some of them ridiculously wrong. All right, so what's going on here? So they're not doing anything wrong. They're just trying to do something which they are structurally incapable of doing because they can't handle pixels. This applies to any kind of image that you ask it to create, not just to maps. It's easy to illustrate with maps, but there was one which was created by, as a joke. Sam Altman sweeping, scaling under the rug with 3 arms. That was the challenge. And they produced a cartoon. I mean, ChatGPT produced a cartoon with 4 arms. So that's because LLMs are not aware of anything. They cannot check their work, and they cannot recognize text in pixels. And that's because they can't recognize anything, but they can't recognize text so that they can link the text as it appears on the map with the text as it appears on a list of British colonies, for instance. It has all the knowledge that it needs to have to get everything right on these maps in text form, in lists and texts. I mean, books about the history of the French and Indian War. But it can't link the pixel patterns in the images with the text in the text, because that's not made of pixels. And that's why the maps are so bad, and why helping it with text is not really helping it, because it can't really make the bridge between the word lake on my nudge in the direction of maybe you make all the lakes be marked in blue. They can't understand how to link that to the use of the pixel pattern, which we read as lake on the map. And so the map is just 2 pixel matrices, one encoding color, the other encoding brightness. From that, you get all the planes of color, but also all the lines of color, some of which are rivers, some of which are boundaries. Sometimes it makes a distinction between those two, sometimes not. On one map, Canada is called boundary. And Canada doesn't really have any boundaries. It's so big, if you go upwards anyway. So how does generative AI work? You have a target domain. In this case, it would be the French and Indian Wars. And you have a subdomain for which you have training data. So in the ideal world, you'd have lots of maps, lots of data about deaths and so forth. And then you collect more and more training data so that you can recognize patterns in the target data. That's the goal. And Sam Altman's motto was always, if you just give us more data, we'll solve the problem. We'll make intelligent AI. And now he's realized that scaling is not enough. Now, lots of people knew that already from the beginning. Our book is all about that. And what you need, in addition to scaling, is representative training data. That means data which has the same statistical distribution as the target data. You can only recognize patterns using training data if the training data has the statistical distribution of the domain where you're wanting to find the patterns. Now, I should get a better stick. All right, I should learn how to use this stick. Let me go down to the end again. I have one more slide do you know how to take me to the end quickly? So this is just one slide. It's not quite the end, but I'll tell you when to stop. Okay, stop here. Yeah, there. So we had this, and then we have this, and this is the crucial thing. So given the way in which pixels are arranged, if you have a very simple pixel image, just 64 by 64 pixels, that's tiny. There are 256 raised to the power of 12,288 different combinations. Now, you can remove some of these combinations when you're dealing with maps, for instance. You can just say, only use these colors. You still end up with a combinatorial problem, which it means that you can't have a distribution across that sort of data with that sort of density of possible differences, which would be analogous to the distribution that you can have among text. Text is relatively constrained. It's rather easy, well, it took a long time and a lot of money, but it's possible anyway to create training data which maps patterns in the target domain pretty accurately. But you can't do that with pixels, and that's why these attempts, I'm afraid will always fail. There's no solution to this, neither through logic-based AI, neurosymbolic AI, nor through large language model-driven AI. The problems are just insolvable. So that was it.
Thank you. Any questions, either here or online? You can unmute yourself and ask questions. Any questions here? Sure.
Hi, I'm Katie Darling.
Hello,
from the
Katie.
graduate school. I don't know a lot about AI, and so I want you to explain what your first line means. LLMs code text token by token. Can you
Yes.
explain what that means, token
Yes,
by
so
token?
when you ask a question, ask a prompt, they say, to ChatGPT, then you enter a sentence. It will be something like, how many people play on a football team or something. And what ChatGPT will do is it will code every single one of those letters separately as a sequence. And then it will have all the letters in all the occurrences of all the words in all its training data be used to define a statistical pattern which relates to your sequence of what they call tokens, which are, for our purposes, just letters of the alphabet. It will then be able to use that statistical coating around your question to predict the next letter. What is the most likely next letter? And in this case, it might be in INAFOOTBALL. That's the way it does it. It predicts from one letter to the next. Now, that's easy to do if you're dealing with linear arrays. But if you're dealing with 2 dimensions, it's very difficult. If you're dealing with 3 dimensions, it's even more difficult. So there they can do wonderful things, but the wonderful things are mainly producing variants on existing videos. So they tweak them. No, you can't, no, because you can't. You have not if you're going to use the traditional statistical prediction of the next token. What they do is they link image data with text. So in other words, they will have lots and lots of sequences which go from a certain kind of image, which will be a circle or an oval shape and a blue. And it will say, if you see something like this, then it may be that it's associated with lake, because they have so many examples where they have a blue circle coded with lake. They don't do very well with lakes which are shaped like this. And that's why in the second of the maps, the Claude map, they were using all geometrical figures because they'd been trained that a lake is always a circle. Sometimes the circles overlap.
So are there any more questions? If there aren't, let's thank Barry again.
Thank you.
Right on time for our next speaker. Again, another interesting application, Cynthia Tysick, and she's a creative spaces librarian. And you might want to sort of introduce yourself and say what the life of a librarian is like these days, and also,
the life of the librarian. All right.
Thank you.
So this is going forward. All right. Okay, so I am Cynthia Tysick. I am an innovative pedagogy and creative spaces librarian in a department in the libraries called Linked. And we predominantly use different innovative tools and technologies to help faculty and students do their teaching and learning, a lot around VR, AI, and other types of like media tools. But what I wanted to kind of present and talk out today is not necessarily a research proposal per se, as it is kind of like a philosophical discussion of, what does it mean to be a librarian now? Okay. I have heard for most of my career, when every new technology comes out, that is the death knell of librarians. We are done. We are finished. And now with AI and the chats, they can do everything for us. So why do we need a librarian? What I want to say is you do need a librarian. As you can see, a lot of the AI and these technologies, they do fall down. But we do have some things in common, and we can use some of the AI that's out there for end product as well as for teaching students how to effectively do research. So, the AI is trying to take this big corpus of information, the large language models, and it's trying to help the client, or we would call them the patron, navigate that and come out to some successful outcome. And that's very similar to what a librarian would do, right? We want to make sure that our patron gets the access to the information that they need, okay? Now, we do this very similarly in having a query. So for a librarian, that's a reference interview. Okay. So when chat came out and you're going to write a prompt or whatever, like we invented that. That's a reference interview. So, okay. So it's embedded in there. We have to translate what the user or the patron is saying into whatever the jargon is, accepted structure that we have. So AI has a structure for its information. It has a way, a process it's going to search. And so does a librarian. We've been trained to have a process and a structure, and it's all organized in some way. I think one of the benefits of libraries and librarians is the organization and the tagging of that information. So we do get some false positives, but probably not as many as AI would have, because we have this rich structure that we organize our universe with. And that's Library of Congress, the subject headings, and the classification. So I don't believe AI is going to be replacing us, but I believe that librarians can use it. Now, full disclosures at the beginning of that slide, I did use AI, I used Gamma to get these images for me, because I'm not going to go through. I said, I'm going to test it. So there are all of these spelling errors and these weird wonky things. And you get that all the time. So if you ever see a student's work and it looks like that, that's why. All right, so in our toolkit, we have the traditional reference interview and the search strategy. Those are the two main things that we use as librarians to help the patron get to the information. Now, with the emerging tools, you have a chat bot. So that's going to be something that's been programmed with the data behind it, but it's going to ask a series of questions. It's not going to immediately produce. It's a bot. So if you're ever on a website and you see that little chat with me and you know it's an AI and it starts to ask you questions, you put your query in, it'll ask you another question. It's been programmed to ask you the other question. Okay, that's the chat bot, which is if you're ever in ChatGPT, you'll notice it doesn't necessarily ask you the question. It just produces the output. Claude is a little bit more sophisticated in that it will be offering you some suggestions. And then, of course, the other tool is the prompt engineering, which is an expanded kind of version of a librarian search strategy. All right, so we've got the common core. So we've got the query into a translation. So we need to take those words and put them into an actionable search strategy, both in AI and librarians and their tools. We both have to refine. Now, AI is not as sophisticated in doing this refinement and understanding because, as we've seen, it's just a tool within characters. So it doesn't have the cognitive wherewithal to understand the topic, okay? But it is going to try to iterate. As we saw, it was giving it its try. Every time there was a new prompt, it was giving it the old college try. And like I said, Claude will come up with some suggestions for me, and it will try it, and sometimes it'll fail. It has to have a knowledge of the context behind it. All right, so if anybody has ever studied what makes a good prompt, there's 7 things that make a good prompt in prompt engineering, and understanding context, having context behind it is also important. The librarian gets that within the interview. The other thing to keep in mind with a librarian doing this type of interface and searching is that oftentimes you have specialist librarians. So these are librarians who are trained in certain disciplines, so they understand the jargon, and also it's the system navigation. So a librarian has hundreds of databases, access to different tools. If you're a map librarian, there's a whole probably different set that you have. If you're a business librarian, there's compendiums of data sets that you have. We are trained, we understand the navigation of those tools. AI doesn't necessarily understand the navigation of those fine-grained tools, all right? It's looking at the large language model. It has a mathematical process that it's following. So I think in terms of like the navigation and the context, that is where AI is not going to do the greatest job. So a search strategy that I would do if you came to me and you had an information need would be synonymous with a prompt engineering. So a librarian goes in, we get the keywords, we ask you what the topic is, we figure out the keywords, and we start to develop our search strategy, which is very similar to the prompt that you would develop. Okay, so here's the foundational reference interview. Somebody comes in, says, I need information about climate change. So the librarian knows right away that is way too broad, okay? And we start the conversation and we start figuring out ways that we might narrow this topic down. Now, it's all the similar things where if you were ever taught to do a good prompt, we teach students to do in searching for resources. And that is there a specific geographic region? Is there a certain time period? Is there a certain number or types of sources? Is it for a particular discipline? Now, if you've ever done a ChatGPT prompt and you've put this question in, has it ever asked you those follow-up questions? No, it doesn't, okay? Because it's just trained to give you an output. You, as the user or the patron, you have to iterate. You have to refine. So for me, my whole, okay, here's where the librarian comes in is who is teaching you to refine? Who is teaching you the components of a good prompt? If that's where you're going to go, okay, I'm not going to necessarily fight that that's where you're going to go. You at least need to be taught how to refine these searches and these prompts and really how to analyze what it's giving you. So at the end of the day, I figure out it's a graduate student, they're in economics, and they're looking at carbon pricing, okay? And they're working on developing countries. I don't know how long it would have taken Claude or ChatGPT to get to that end. I would probably say that it was a long time. And the person probably got really frustrated, and they probably ended up just taking what they got, and it was probably, you know, in plain English, garbage, all right? But sitting with a librarian, you get down to what you really need. So here's a chatbot interaction, right? So remember, it's trained to ask you questions. It's been trained to try and clarify for you. It's not your traditional, you know, Claude. It's what you trained, you know, if you had it on a business website, all right? It's a list and it's got a series of questions it's going to pull out for you. So problem I have is between everything after 2. All right, so tell me about climate change. Well, it's been programmed to know that it needs more context. So that's the next thing. Cause, impact, solution, cause and effect. Like very easy question. But then how did it get to a need analysis about carbon pricing? How did it jump, right? There's a conversation that has to happen before it made that jump. So it doesn't necessarily get there. The onus is on the user to understand they have to keep narrowing down. They have to be more and more specific. Whereas if they were doing this interaction with a reference librarian, especially one that is either in economics or environmental studies, we would know to be asking these clarifying questions. But once again, this chatbot is making this jump, okay? And it's up to the user to make that progression. And they may not do that. So here is what we would do, say, as a librarian. I would go in because, I mean, I've had this happen. I don't know the topic per se, right? But I'm trained. I'm trained to understand how information is structured, how subject headings work, right? And I can go in and run a climate change search, get 7,000 results. with my structure and my tools, I can work with the user to refine over on the side their filters. And I can find out from them, again, is it a particular country? Is it a particular time? Like, what specifically are you looking for? There could be special subjects that'll narrow down, and we might find this whole thing with the carbon pricing. I could be the economics librarian, and I might say, well, I read an article about carbon pricing. What about something like that? The AI is not going to lead the user into that conversation, but a librarian is, okay? As we keep going, we're using our structure for searching, which is using Boolean. Now, we're using the operators or we're teaching keywords, right? We're pulling certain phrases. With the AI, it's a large language model and it does natural language, okay? All right, so then I limited down to my type, my peer-reviewed, and then I'm down to the 23. That interaction does not really take that long if you're sitting with a trained librarian. We could probably do that maybe 15 to 20 minutes and we're done, compared to, slogging through with something like this where I have to keep figuring out on my own how I'm going to narrow this down, okay? And again, I have no idea how we jumped from the strategic to the further specification, right? It's just like a magic jump. AI, I have to think this through. And maybe if I'm a graduate student, I may be able to figure this out. But if I'm a sophomore and I'm doing this, or I'm a first year using this for my, English 105 basic paper, I'm not going to be able to make this leap. One of the issues or problems for me is the whole natural language method. So students now don't want to search with what we would call a controlled vocabulary. They don't want to search with specific keywords. They want to write their question out like they do everywhere else. And what I'm starting to wonder is, how does the AI do this? How does it translate the common jargon like global warming into the accepted academic term of climate change? Like, how is it doing that? Is it doing that? Where did that come from? Or poor places, poor countries to developing countries, right? So I really want to understand, because more and more of our databases and search interfaces in our discipline are moving to natural language. And unfortunately, I then lose that nugget of information in terms of what are the accepted keywords. It's somehow mapped or tagged, but I don't understand how. And as librarians are being asked to embrace more and more AI tools in their search interfaces, I have been trained to, lift the hood and kick the tires and really understand. And I can't really do that with AI right now, because I don't understand how it went from global warming to climate change. Okay. I know how I did it, because I knew the, subject heading is climate change. I know that it's organized that way in the database. It'll show me what are the subjects, what is it tagged, and I'll see it's tagged climate change. All right, so this is just a little bit about our classification scheme, just so you understand. For those of you who don't understand Libraryland, like, we have classification schemes for everything. Everything you look at, it's not, just magically appears. It's that we have organized all of our books, all of our journals, everything into a classification scheme. So this is where you get to see how we organized, what our structure is. AI, to my knowledge, has an architecture. Okay, they got the neural networks, the relevance weighting, as you're saying, words or phrases and numbers, tokens that come closer to each other, going to bubble up, right? So it does have some sort of architecture. So maybe we can use both the librarian tools and the AI tools together in a more happy way. The context. So if you ever chat with your AI, once you keep going, it'll start to grasp your context. So that once I'm at the end and I start talking about, climate adaptations, or I start using the word adaptation, I don't use the word climate, right? So my AI and we've been talking about climate change. And suddenly I throw in the word adaptation. It understands that I'm not talking about biological adaptation or evolution. It understands it's within the context of climate change. Okay, so again, that's very similar to what a librarian do, understanding the context. But we got the context out of the way right away within our interview. AI didn't ask me, what's the discipline, what's the, the area of study. I had to figure that out as the user, the person interacting. Okay, so what can we do if we put the two of them together? So I think we can work together. Now, obviously, you've shown when it comes to images, that's going to be, it's going to drop, right? That's not going to work. But it can take large amounts of data and synthesize it for us. It can crunch numbers, it can pull things together, and it can create it and package it very quickly in a way that might be digestible to the user. But we have this critical expertise that we can bring to the table as a librarian, where we can help you evaluate what you're looking at, figure out if there's any bias, because where did the data come from in the large language model? Is there a whole subset of knowledge somewhere in the world that was missing? So remember what I said, like librarians, we like to kick the tires, lift the hood, look at it all. I remember early days of library school, opening up the book and learning how to navigate some of these research books that we had, learning how to use the index and the table of contents and, how to fish and how it was all organized. And then understanding that there were pieces of information that were missing. And an AI is not going to acknowledge that, but a librarian will. In the refinement, the librarian is going to say, well, this is great. You got climate change and how it works in developing countries, but did you look at the literature coming out of the developing countries? Where's that literature? Where's that voice coming in? AI is not going to probably grab that voice, but a librarian is going to be sensitive to the potential bias in your sources and want you to look at alternatives. Okay, let's see. All right, so if we put it all together, here's the graduate student. I need help with my climate change thesis. Here is the more intense reference interview, what discipline, geographic focus. There's my standard search that I did in any one of my databases. And then here is how we're maybe narrowing this down to like the prompt engineering, where I'm focusing on asking it to look and analyze the data from 3 specific countries. And I'm asking it to present the findings in a way that would be common in an economics thesis. Okay, so I'm really asking it to produce like a real specific item. I didn't ask it to write the whole paper. And me, as the graduate student, I should have enough knowledge right now to really understand what it produced and if it looks rational, okay? And I'm not saying that as the graduate student, that's what I'm going to take wholesale, but it was able to take these numbers for me. The librarian could have given me the data, and I could have put it in whatever, process I had and come up with it myself. But I'm asking the AI to help me do it more quickly. All right. So I want to cut now to my prompt. So ask okay, so what is Cindy really advocating for? So what I'm advocating for is if you're a faculty member, instructor, and you're working with students, have your librarian come in and work with you on how to do this, on how to effectively search, and also how to be using AI. So the biggest thing that I guess, flex that I have in a classroom is when I bring AI in and the students see how much it fails, okay? How much it doesn't do what we really want it to do, all right? So back in the day, Wikipedia was going to put me out of business, okay? And to me, what this does is a lot like Wikipedia. I asked it to, I need to write a paper on climate change. That's my prompt, all right? Okay, so it gives me an outline, all right? It doesn't write the paper for me. It tells me what could be good, thesis statement, and then it gives me cause, effect, global response, challenges. Now, if I'm a librarian, I'm gonna ask, how long does this paper have to be? And students gonna say, okay, well, it's like a 3-page paper. Well, I could tell you right now that's way too much. all of these bullets are too much. What do you want to focus on? So I would focus on maybe human activity and the human impact on the environment, right? Because all the rest is like a really big paper if you want to keep going, right? So I would have the librarian come in and show a student, okay, this is what prompt engineering looks like. I don't want to hide from the students. I don't want to hide AI from them. They're going to do it. Path of least resistance, they're going to do it. So let's show them what it looks like. So here's the prompt. A junior university level paper on climate change, focusing on human activity, major cause and the environmental impacts that have resulted. I need 1,500 pages with peer-reviewed, cited references. Can you help me? Well, first of all, it said, I don't think you meant 1,500 pages. I think you meant words. Okay, it got that. All right, yes, you're right. It decided it was going to be an APA style. I didn't tell it the style. And then it wrote this, okay? And a lot of faculty will look at this and be horrified. The student's just going to copy and paste this thing, and they're going to put it in their, and they're going to be done. But as a librarian, I'm going to say, all you're looking at is an encyclopedia entry. All you're looking at is background knowledge and brief summaries of some key points to this topic. You don't have a theory. You don't have an idea. You didn't weave anything in together. So no, your professor's going to be looking at this right away and like, this is not a well-developed paper on this topic, not at a junior level, certainly not, okay? So no, it's like looking at a Wikipedia entry. Don't quote from this. Don't use this. This is nothing. This is maybe a summary, and it might help you if you want to get some summaries of articles, but there's better tools like Notebook LM or Elicit that you can put articles in, and it'll help summarize some of the key points. Like, I would not even use it for that purpose. And then there's also the whole issue of the references. Most of these references, they might open up depending on where you are. Okay, but for a librarian, this is a really good example of sources. And you pay a lot of money for sources that are behind paywalls. Okay, so what you're probably looking at here is stuff that is open access. It's not stuff that you paid your student fee for, what we sometimes refer to as the good stuff, right? So there is a lot of ways that as a librarian, I can use the AI creatively to show a student how they may or may not want to be using AI and chats like this in their research products, so in their output. So the final thought is that okay. That's it. We're done. The future of information isn't about choosing between the human expertise and the machine. It's about combining the best of both worlds. And I do want to say that librarians are still going to be at the forefront of any type of information innovation out there. So thank you.
Any questions? Yes, we've had a pair of talks that, in some sense, work towards the same things. Barry has some sort of predictions about how these problems are not going to be solved. Of course, there are people on the other side that might think that, there is reasonable amounts of success that you've already found. It's just that, you are discovering these problems and you'll need to figure out, and there are clever minds at work trying to address these problems. But I think the challenge that you are bringing to the fore also is that when you see these AI technologies operating, there is this, especially when you are sort of learning, this is a very fast developing field, and it's something that is still under development, and that's something that a lot of people don't seem to realize. So the end users, it's important to educate them about what the pitfalls and fallacies are, so that they can be, and then they sort of make the effort to learn what the technology is that is driving all this. So how much should they trust this? Getting some sense of what the underpinning technology, how it actually works, is probably critical, because that's what will cause you to be cautious about trusting something that is like shiny and glittery. There's some obviously like some things that you try, like, that it is really failing here. Then you sort of, but for the most part, when you're talking about text and you're asking it to produce something, the tendency is that if the language seems well written, you sort of tend to not really dig deeper into the ideas that are expressed in those thoughts. And we have to teach our students to be critical in evaluating the. Yep.
So this came to me because I was thinking about the books in the image there. So you didn't talk about books. Do you ever send people to books?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, are all the books in ChatGPT's memory?
No, because not everything has been digitized. Because the other thing I didn't mention
yes,
in here was serendipity. Because of the way we organize those materials around a scheme, there's serendipity. So you could go up into a book and find a neighbor to it and be like, oh, I didn't even think about this. And you don't really get that with AI. You lose the serendipity in the search. But there's a whole level of curiosity that's also missing. Right. So
you get that in bookshops too. So I have been suggesting that things are in much better shape when it comes to text than when it comes to images, particularly older images. But yesterday, for the first time, I encountered a case where ChatGPT falsified a text quotation in quite an important philosopher. And so I pressed it. I said, this doesn't exist. It's nowhere, because this particular philosopher, all his works have been digitized. And it didn't apologize. I said, I think you should apologize. And it said, yes, I agree, I should apologize. But then it defended itself by saying this is actually a paraphrase of two thoughts in this particular philosopher. And then it gave the original thoughts. They were falsified too. So
yeah, again,
some of the information produced. A friend of mine who's in a different discipline is actually started to use the chats like Claude to argue themselves out of like existence. Okay. So tell me why you don't need an economist and you can use predictions from AI. Like, argue that to me. And the person said that they spent 30 minutes banging on the keyboard, arguing, really getting more and more angry. And then they had to stop and realize that this was not real. Like, this was like, this isn't real. But some of the arguments were like all of the things you argue again, why you shouldn't be in this, career, AI is going to write you out or whatever. I just thought that was really interesting that it took them 30 minutes to figure out, I'm getting upset by an AI.
Yep. Any questions from people online? So I think we are at the top of the hour, and it's interesting discussion. And obviously, we all are going to use this technology. It's not going to go away. So we just need to figure out how to make sure that it doesn't cause us harm, and we learn to use it the right way and be skeptical, be aware of things. So yeah, I'd like to thank Barry and Cynthia again for wonderful talks. And please join us for future Tech Exchange seminars as well. And here's a token of our appreciation. Sure.
Sorry, I really.
Thank you all.